Welcome to the weekly Shir, almost weekly, of the Zera Shimshon. I know it's Yom Shlishi already, but I'm going to go back to the previous Parshat because it has a lot of inyanim that are shaykh to not only the Shabbos of Parshat Vayakhel, but also in the coming weeks about Pesach. So it's Gimel Nisan, Tafshin Pei Aleph, and we welcome everybody to the Shir. I finally got my Zera Shimshon back. Baruch Hashem. My books came this last week, and we had over 100 boxes, over almost 2 tons. So Baruch Hashem, we got here, and nothing was damaged. I still can't find some stuff, but that's another problem. Okay, let's go. It says, I'm in Zera Shimshon Parshat Vayakhel base. Midrash in the Yalkut says, and Vayakhel remez tough ches, excuse me. Al pasuk Vayakhel Moshe, on the pasuk and says Vayakhel Moshe. V'tchilas haTorah al ad seifay ein bo parsha shenemar bereisha Vayakhel el b'zu bilvad. So from the beginning of the Torah till now, there's no parsha that begins with the word Vayakhel until now. Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu aseh lecha kilos gedolos. So make for yourself great congregations. V'dorosh lifneim berabim halachas Shabbos, and in darshan for them, explain to them in public the halachas of Shabbos. That's how important it is. Kadesh yilmudu mimcha dayrais haborim o haboyim. So in order that the future generation should learn lahakil kihilos b'chol Shabbos v'Shabbos, in order to gather together every single Shabbos, people together, and v'likonis lebate midrashes, and to enter the bate midrashes and the lamed, and to teach them lahayros leYisrael divrei Torah Yisur v'heter, and to teach the Jewish people the Torah, the words of Torah. That's what's permitted, what's asur, what's not permitted. Kadesh yeh shemi hagodol miskalis beineim, in order that my great name should be honored and praised in front of them, between them. Mikan omru, from here they said, this is all the words of the Midrash, yes, in Midrash Yalkut. From here they say, Moshe tikin lahem Yisrael sheyu darshin b'inyanim shel yom, that Moshe should fix for them that they should explain the matters of the day, that it means the upcoming day or Yom Tov. Hilchais Pesach with Pesach. The halachas of Pesach, that has a shleishi yom before Pesach, you're supposed to learn the halachas of Pesach. Hilchas Hatzeres Batzeres, and the halachas of Shavuos and Shavuos. Halachas Chag Bechag, and then the halachas of Sukkos before Sukkos. And in Sukkos also. Omar Moshe Yisrael, Imatem Oisim Keseder Hazeh, if you do this order, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Male Aleichem Ki'ilu Himlachtem Oisai Be'alamai. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu equivocates it as if you made him the king over the world. Shenemar, it says in Pasuk in Yeshaya, Mem Gimel Pasuk Beis, V'atem Eidai, you are my witnesses, Ne'um Hashem, so says God, Ve'anochi Keil, and I am God. That's the end of the Midrash. Now, Tzorchi, we need to investigate what's going on here. What's particular important about gathering in groups, in big groups? And why dafka did you need these for the generations? Not for the generation of Moshe. That's what's mashma Moshe and Midrash, like mashma in the words of the Midrash. They should learn from you. This is only a dugma, an explanation, an example of for the future generations. And what proof does he bring from this pasuk that you are my witnesses? Yishatars, the Isa B'Torah or Chaim Simon Taf, Reish Samaches Sif Zayin, Shechayzim Loimar Vayechulu Achar Arvishel Shabbos. So we have accustomed to say Vayechulu after the davening of Shabbos and at night, the Leil Shabbos. Laheid Kulam Bayachad Al Ma'aseh Bereishis, to testify. Everybody testifies on the creation. Like it says in the Taz, Because an individual who davens by himself, he doesn't go back and say Vayakhel. Because an individual cannot make testimony. And here, in order to testify to God, there's another Indian here. He says, it's a chiddush to me also, that you need 10 people. Because normally you only need 2. And the truth of it is, by the Ashkenazim, if you don't say it together with the tzibur, you say it with another person. Anyway, the im yirtze yachad oimrei lo yiskaven l'shem edus. If a person, that is an individual, wants to say it, he doesn't do it because of testimonial. That's the end of the Taz. The nira mikan she'eno doime shavach anite la kadosh baruch hu beroivam lehashvach anite lo beyachid. So you can see from here, there's no comparison whatsoever to the praises that are given by our congregation than by a person, an individual. Shahari kol echad ve'echad kvar omar vayichulu ba'amida, because each and every individual said already vayichulu by the Shmona Esrei. Ve'afal pi kein ha'achaysim loimer oise b'kol ra v'yachad. But we still go back and say it loudly and together. And in the 6th parak of Shabbos, it's brought at Daf Samech Omed Aleph, says there's a story with the sandal hamesumar, the cleated sandal, that asru b'Shabbos mishum ma'aseh shahaya b'Shabbos. There was a ma'aseh they had. I won't go into the details, but they unfortunately they were scared by the enemy, and they actually killed each other with these cleated sandals. But so that's why we're not allowed to wear them on Shabbos. Nowhere and no how. But the point here is that it's also on Yom Tov it's prohibited, even though the Maisa was only on Shabbos. So we actually prohibited on Yom Tov as well, because it's a day of Kanufia. It's a gathering day like Shabbos. But even though, not by Taina Sibur, because even though it's a Yom Kanufia, everybody gathers together, but they don't do work. Because they're gathering together in a permitted way, because they're not prohibited to do work, like Shabbos. Look at there in the Gemara. And also it's permitted to free up a tzibur from certain vows. HaShirim is a certain type of vow, and I'm going to read this inside, and if I find it here, this is interesting. It says, this is brought in the Beis Yosef, the Torah in the Beis Yosef. He says, Kasav Rashba, B'tshuva, Shenago Olam Nahater Charmei HaKahal B'Shabbos. The world is accustomed to permit or to release the kahal from charamim, from certain vows. Afal pi she'enam tzarich l'Shabbos, even though you don't need it, they're not necessary to release them for Shabbos, like a husband would be permitted to, or a person would be permitted to free himself or get a heter from a neder if he needs it for Shabbos. Afal pi she'meikar hadin nira she'enam r'shayim la'asais kain, even though meikar hadin are not permitted to do it, because it's not the necessity of Shabbos, but Shekach Nalgu, Minhag Yisrael Torah, and the Minhag of Israel is considered Torah. Ulai Yesh Lehem Amal Sheyismachu, but some say that they have what to rely on. Lefisha Ein Kanufia Ela B'Shabbos. Here again, the word Kanufia, the gathering. Vayakhel, right? They're gathering only on Shabbos. And if they don't permit them to gather on Shabbos, I mean, if they don't permit them when they're all gathered together on Shabbos, then they're not going to find another day. Then further, there will never be a heter for them. That's why they relied to permit them to free themselves up from this obligation on Shabbos. I'm going back in the Zera Shimshon now. In Perak Dalet Revi, the Pesachim, it says, there's in the 4th Perak, in Pesachim, if you go from a place that they don't do certain customs to a place that they do certain customs, yeah, okay. So they put the chumar, the severity of the place where he went out from. And there's no din of here. There's a rule that you can't be different because you might cause an argument. Okay? Don't stand out in the crowd. Right? It doesn't apply here because Mishum Sha'roya Oisibatul, because if somebody sees him not doing anything, he'll say, he doesn't have what to do. Because there's a lot of people not doing anything, standing around in the shuk and not working. Even though everybody doesn't do malacha on Shabbos, so you don't have any recognition because of the command of Hashem to gather together. Because nobody's doing any work today. But if everybody gathers together in the Beis HaKnesses to listen to the drush of on Shabbos, so there will be public knowledge that they do it dafka in this day, because it's prohibited to do work anyway. Because God commanded it to gather together to remind everybody of the creation of the world. So it's greater the praise that comes from right? That more people, the greater the praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'kol zehu b'doyres habayim shehim mifuzorim yad kan. So that's good about the future generations because not everybody's in one little place, right? The terudim b'chol yom v'yom, and everybody's busy every day. Mimei achol be'eskeim b'malachtam. Everybody's busy doing their work. They're going to have to. In the old days, it was an agricultural society. They were doing their farming. They couldn't come to shul all the time. What's the chiddush by Moshe Rabbeinu when everybody was there in the same place? And it wasn't so recognizable that they're gathering together on Shabbos. Furthermore, they didn't have work to do. They were taken care of all week long. And they didn't have to work the ground at all. But they didn't work anything agricultural. They didn't have to fix their garments either. It says the pasuk in Dvarim Ches that they didn't wear out the garments and their shoes the whole time they were in the midbar. So there was no sewing and no weaving. Okay. Even though there was grinding and cooking to some of them, anyway, it says they tachanu v'dacham b'menducha bishlo b'parur. Okay, so some of them had to do something to the man in order to make it palatable. Im kol zeh afim yisasvu b'drasha shel Moshe. Even if they would gather to listen to the drasha of Moshe, in raya shelo yasu malachazu. There's no proof that they wouldn't do this be doing any work because maybe they went and did work before, or they did this cooking or whatever, the grinding before the drasha, or yasu achar drasha. Of course, it was Shabbos; they're not going to do it. But mishum hachi doyrei shamoisha lohayat tzarich lekach el lelamed ledoyrei saboim. Here's the point. But this was only not for Moshe Rabbeinu's generation because they didn't need it. Because it was only to teach the future generations that would be busy with work all week long, so they need to gather together on Shabbos in order to hear a drasha. Inami doyresha Moshe lohayat tzarich lekach. Moshe Rabbeinu's generation, they were dardeya, they didn't need this, right? Shahoyel shaman haya yerid b'chol yom Shabbos lohaya yerid. Every day the man came down, but on Shabbos it didn't. So what did they do? That was a great publicity. So therefore, they didn't have to gather together for a drasha. But after Moshe's generation, and they should gather together, that they testify, they gather together, they're testifying that God created the world on Shabbos. He didn't create the world on Shabbos. They're gathering together on Shabbos. There's a testimony that God created the entire world. And God commanded them to praise to God that they're following, that they're prohibited to do work on Shabbos. And this is a beautiful little piece. He says, and he brings remember he asked the question, what did he bring this pasuk for? What's the raya? I'm going to bring this. He says there's six are testifying, and this midrash is brought in the Gemara Chagiga and Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, in the Tosfos also. He says there's shleisha me'idim zeh al zeh. Three are testifying one upon another. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yisrael, and Shabbos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is testifying by Yisrael me'idim al Shabbos. These two are testifying on Shabbos. Shehu Yom Menucha, that is the time of rest. And Yisrael v'Shabbos me'idim al HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yisrael and the Shabbos are testifying on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shehu Echad, who he is one. HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'Shabbos me'idim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Shabbos are testifying al Yisrael shehem yechidim be'umais. And they are the ones that are superior and unique amongst all the nations of the world. There is a segula, and I'm going to read it also, so I haven't done this for many weeks, so let's do this. It's a short segula. The learning that a person does on Shabbos, and it's shaykh to this little piece that we do it anyway, the learning that a person does on Shabbos is worth more than the Torah study he accomplishes during the week. Rav Zev from Haifa had a story to tell. As a member of the workforce, I managed to learn the Daf Yomi throughout the week and not much more. Of course, I knew that I should find time to learn more, but somehow it didn't happen. Then one Shabbos I was sitting in shul and there was a copy of Zera Shimshon weekly newsletter lying on the table not far away. I picked it up and began perusing. First idly and then with great rising interest. The contents were beautiful and mamish pearls of wisdom in every way. And even the style of writing was clear and pleasant and professional. I enjoyed the Torah and with the Zera Shimshon very much, and I was also drawn to the author's unique promise to all who learn it. So it began. Every week, without fail, I'd made sure to bring home a copy of the newsletter, the Zera Shimshon. Then, during the course of the Friday night Suda, I read through the pearls contained within it. This became a firm tradition in our home, Chok v'lo yavar. A year passed with the Zera Shimshon, by now a standard and much welcomed guest in our home. Unfortunately, people are weak. For some reason, the newsletter was no longer distributed in my shul, and when that happened, instead of going out and got on my way to obtain a copy somewhere else, I just kind of allowed our precious Friday night Seder and Zera Shimshon to fall by the wayside. Oh, not good. Time passed. One day I realized something interesting. I work as an insurance broker at a very large office. My take-home pay is dependent on the number of policies I sell. For many years, I had been bringing home a very decent salary and had been sufficiently satisfied with my parnasa, to the point where I stopped giving thought to moving up in my company. You've done well, I said to myself. There's really nowhere else to climb. As I sat there, sunk in a rare moment of introspection, I realized that for the entire year that we as a family had been learning Zera Shimshon every Friday night, I had managed to close increasingly higher policies every month. My boss was surprised by my success. In truth, it really wasn't normal, and he couldn't stop smiling and increasing my paycheck. During that entire year, I'd enter the office in the morning, and from the second I sat down on my desk, I didn't have a moment to breathe from the sheer volume of work that was coming my way. I recalled the meetings and the phone calls and the contracts, and I realized how successful I'd been throughout the year, abnormally successful. But that wasn't the end of my realization, because I also understood that from the moment I ceased learning Zera Shimshon, business reverted to the way it had been before. Suddenly, I was back to normal, with a regular, modest paycheck and the normal, moderate successes. At that moment, I understood that the schus of learning in Zera Shimshon had been standing at my side the entire year and assisting me with my parnasa in a very real way. It goes without saying that I immediately resolved to begin learning Zera Shimshon again every Friday night. Come with me, not because of the money, but because the Zera Shimshon had been such a clear and obvious source of blessing in our home, in our lives, a source of blessing that I was no longer willing to live without. Sure, money is important, but learning the Zera Shimshon is so much more than money. It's like a guardian angel keeping a watch over a person. And that being the case, I didn't really see how I could willingly choose to forego such a wonderful schus. Schus yogen alein bal kloiso. Have a good tabach.